right, so Proverbs 31.
Good luck.
Thank you. It really is in the lectionary today. I just want to assure you. 'Cause I know some might accuse me of cherry picking, but it really is in the lectionary. And honestly, I really tried to do something else. Because who wants to talk about Proverbs 31, especially when you're a woman? So what comes to mind when you hear Proverbs 31?
What's that?
What's that?
What does it say?
Okay. Clearly not female in the Baptist church growing up. What's Proverbs 31? Nobody?
You asked what comes to mind.
Uh-huh.
When I saw that up there, the Barbie movie came to mind.
The Barbie movie. Interesting, okay.
The little statement, the monologue in the Barbie movie about what a woman has to be. That monologue.
Yeah, what a woman has to be. That's succinctly what Proverbs 31 has been taught. That's how it's been taught. This is what a woman is supposed to be. Not just any woman, the ideal woman. Okay. Anybody, now I did not grow up, as y'all know, I didn't grow up Southern Baptist. So this was never a thing for me. But as I've grown up and worked more and more with women who are survivors of domestic violence, in my work as a therapist and the trauma, this gets brought up. And it became a thing for me. I was like, what? I don't read books, I listen to them. I still count it as reading, but there's a memoir of a woman, and the memoir is called The Well-Trained Wife. And she was raised conservative, evangelical. She then married, because that's what she was supposed to do. Her husband had some mental health issues that became known, but throughout their life together, they got involved with I'm not going to remember his name right, Bill Gothard? Okay, yeah, exactly. And then some of the names that I've heard you all talk about, like Palmer? No. The guy, Paige Patterson. Yeah, so she mentions him and a couple of those other, like, oh, I've heard of them now. So thank you for that education. And the stuff that she went through was just horrific. And she ultimately had to leave him. They got involved in a very, very conservative Presbyterian, I would call it a sect, that they had to sign a contract that they were in it for life and couldn't leave. It was a covenant. And it's a horrific tale, yet also a tale of faith and of victory in faith and of overcoming, which is pretty great. So where Proverbs 31 comes in is she often heard that lauded over her. And she was raised to believe that this is the image of a godly woman. And so was her husband. And so was the conservative leadership of the church. And therefore, if you didn't fit the mold, you were in trouble. One of the things that I really had to work with a lot of my survivors of domestic violence is to help them understand your husband doesn't get to discipline you. You are an adult. You discipline children, not to punish them, but to guide and direct them and mold them. That is not your husband's role. And it's amazing how many women think the opposite. At least it was amazing to me. So let's talk about the text. What happens when we actually put it in context? Anybody heard of King Lemuel? Yeah, I hadn't either. But the commentaries and scholars, some of them say it's actually Solomon, but it's a pet name that his mother called him, and so he refers to himself sometimes that way. Other people say, no, y'all are confused, that's not right, we don't really know much about this guy. Either way, Proverbs 31 is words from his mother. Words of advice on how he was a prince to become king, and Proverbs 31 was a lesson to him on what to do and not do. So we picked the passage up at verse 10, but 1 through 9 speaks of all the things that a king should and shouldn't do. So don't give your strength to women, your ways to those who destroy kings. It is not for kings to drink wine, or for rulers to desire strong drink, or else they will drink and forget what they've decreed. That would be bad. And they will pervert the rights of all the afflicted. So if kings get drunk, then they're going to take advantage of the rights of the underlings and the little ones. However, she goes on to say, give strong drink to one who is perishing, to one who is dying. Have mercy on that person. That brought to mind when my father died. He lived with cancer for a couple of years, and with hospice, we were all ready to keep him on morphine. God blessed us, and he died before we had to get into all of that. But that's what we do for those who are perishing. And so back then, I could see strong drink being. Let those people who are in bitter distress also drink strong wine. Let them drink and forget their poverty. Not sure that's helpful. But remember their misery no more. And then speak out for those who can't speak for the rights of all the destitute. Speak out, judge righteously, and defend the rights of the poor and needy. All pretty good things for a king to do. Then we get to the Ode to a Capable Wife is the title in the NRSV. If you were to see this in the original Hebrew, it would become so evident that you can't escape it. And I don't know Hebrew, but in the original Hebrew, it starts with basically the equivalent of the ABCs. In the original Hebrew, it's an acrostic. It's Aleph, Bet, on down through Gimel, and all the way down. I got a D in Hebrew and Duke, so don't remember much of that. Yeah. So it's conceived that this was an acrostic that helped people, particularly Lemuel, remember what to look for in a partner and how to interact in the world. It's probably advice. But then when you delve a little deeper, it's not really about women at all, which I found very hopeful. I stumbled on an article, rabbit holes of the internet, but this is an article from a woman out of a seminary in India, and her name is Shobana Vitravel, and her article starts out, since I began growing in faith, I was the classic good girl, eager to do all the right things. That's me. I can identify with that. In most women's meetings, Proverbs 31 was the key passage to study, but I had a very complicated relationship with that passage. Proverbs 31 was presented as the yardstick to measure all Christian women. It's the standard for being a good, godly woman, which meant being a devoted wife and mother, who is also a domestic goddess, as well as active and enterprising outside the home. Okay, if we're all those things, do we need men? Just a thought. I was all set to be this woman, she says, and translate this to whatever modern equivalency I could. But as it happened, I turned out to be single, without any children, and very far from being a domestic goddess. Well, I'm no longer single, but the other two definitely apply to moi. It was very difficult to relate to this expectation and to this passage. Even for women who are married, she says, or married with children, this passage can be intimidating. It feels like a burden that weighs them down with unrealistic expectations and makes them feel less than. She also says that often this passage gets dismissed by men because it's for women. Or if it is paid attention to by men, it's, as I said earlier, to say, this is what you should be doing. Why aren't you this good, godly wife? You need to pray harder. You need to go to church more. You need to listen to the women elders, on and on. But Shabana argues that it's actually for everybody. Now, some people see this ode to a capable wife, as I said before, as advice on what to look for in a wife. So, you should look for someone who you can trust, who is good and will not harm you, who works with willing hands and is eager to serve. Yeah. But then she takes a turn. She mentions the movie Top Gun. Seen it? The original one? Yep. I got to see it on the big screen, like drive-in movie theater one summer, and one of my favorites. I mean, who can't love Top Gun? And then she mentions Top Gun 2. Anybody see that one? Okay. Did you feel like you were watching the same movie over again? Pretty much, right? There were all kinds of allusions back to the first movie. Well, she says that Psalm 31 is like that. It alludes back to or connects to the Proverbs 1 through 9. And if somebody would look up Proverbs 9, 4 through 6, and then somebody else, Proverbs 9, 16 through 18. And when somebody has it, just jump on in and read it for us, please.
I got 4 to 6.
Okay?
Let all who are simple come to my house. To those who have no sense, she says, come eat my food and drink my wine, and drink the wine I have mixed. Leave your simple ways, and you will live. Walk in the way of insight.
Does that sound like it's talking about a woman? Come to my house. Come eat my bread, drink my wine. Except in chapter 9, verse 1, wisdom has built her house. She has hewn her 7 pillars. And then 14 through 16.
9:14.
Uh-huh.
She sits at the door of her house on a seat at the highest point of the city, calling out to those who pass by, who go straight on their way. Let all who are simple come to my house. To those who have no sense, she says, stolen water is sweet, food eaten in secret is delicious.
And now would you read verse 13?
Verse 13.
Mm-hmm.
Folly is an unruly woman. She is simple and knows nothing.
So Proverbs is talking about wisdom and folly. And this ode to a capable wife takes on a hugely different understanding when I read it from the perspective of the she being Sophia. Suddenly, just got goosebumps, there's hope here, even for us women. Wisdom. Sophia is the Greek name for the Hebrew concept of wisdom. As Christians, we talk about Christ being logos, the word, which points to wisdom. In the ancient world, it was very common to have gods that were both male and female. There were counterparts, okay? And often that gets lost in our modern view of monotheism, making sure that we are talking about one God. But what gets kind of thrown aside is Sophia, the image of wisdom as Sophia. Okay? So she argues that more than a to-do list, this passage reveals wisdom in action, paints a picture of what it looks like to have wisdom rule our life. Not a husband, not a wife, but wisdom. It's an ancient poem written thousands of years ago, and it breaks the stereotypes of the modern woman. Because women wisdom is portrayed and personified as a woman of valor. So she points to verses 10 through 12. And verse 10, an excellent wife who can find, she is far more precious than jewels. The word excellent in Hebrew is closely associated with the term for warrior, and it has a lot of military undertones. We are not going to describe a good wife the way we think of it and the way we have applied this scripture to be associated with military. We associate military with men. And then the next verse, it talks about the gain. Says, where'd I go? 10, 11. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. The Hebrew word that they use there is actually better translated as plunder, also militaristic, right? She rises up like a lioness and provides food for her household, where the word for food is actually prey, P-R-E-Y. And then she girds her loins as if dressing for battle in verse 17. And then in Proverbs 3, verse 15. Flip back one moment, please. Again, it's repeated, she is more precious than jewels, and nothing you desire can compare with her. But in verse 13 of that same chapter, happy are those who find wisdom and those who get understanding. For her income is better than silver, her revenue better than gold. She is more precious than jewels, and nothing you desire can compare with her. Which is repeated then in verse 10 of chapter 31. So, if you change your perspective, and rather than thinking of this being about only women and married women overseeing a household, and instead see it as talking about wisdom, these are some of the things that Proverbs 31 says women or wisdom brings. So we see wisdom or women being in action, where working hard. Wisdom helps us to work hard, work smarter, not harder. It generates wealth. Well, if you're wise in your investments, you're wise in the work that you do, then you're going to be set and you don't have to worry. With wisdom, we are able to prepare for the future. With wisdom, we will have a flourishing home. If our focus is on wisdom, and then also the fear of the Lord, which is another concept that comes in towards the end of this passage. So, Proverbs is not talking about head knowledge. It's talking about gut knowledge. My sister and I used to think about Abraham Lincoln, I think it was, common sense ain't common. I had the book smarts. She has the common sense, and that is still true to today. She is the most amazing mom I've ever met. She was able to raise 2 amazing kids. I went to school, and I went to more school, and then I went to more school, and that was where I was called. So common sense was her bailiwick, and book smarts was mine. So women of valor are going to not only they're not going to focus on the book smart, they're going to focus on the wisdom smart. So when you think of the difference between smart and wisdom, what's the difference? Or are they the same thing? I've kind of tipped my hand already.
I think wisdom is deeper. Smart seems like it can have boundaries. That it might be book smart, it might be like a math problem, or it might be I can dig up, things that happen in history but wisdom to me can be that, and to not go out in the rain without an umbrella.
There you go.
Or anything, what?
Applying the
Yeah,
smarts.
Applying, using
Okay.
it to make good decisions, or decisions that will lead to all of that.
Okay.
Well, I think wisdom applies to your situation. If you're smart, it needs to apply. A lot of people, smart people out there doing a lot of really bad things. Because they don't have the fear of God or the love of God or compassion. And people who have not made it past high school can be very wise.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. And I think wisdom comes from experience, if you're open to it. If you are open to recognizing mistakes and learning from them, if you're open to other people's perspectives and guided by them, not replacing your own inner voice, but allowing it to have an impact. When she talks about sharing, preparing for the future, the word sluggard is about like the ways of the ant. So in Proverbs 6:6-11, talks about the ways of the ant, and the sluggard is like that. And the sluggard is told to see how the ant prepares for winter in the gathering in summer. Like, y'all, I've got lots of squirrels in our backyard that I watch from my shrink shack, and they are preparing for winter, burying acorns everywhere, and we have random trees popping up when he gets to cut down. So, wisdom, or a woman of valor, plans for the future. She's not afraid of the snow. And then wisdom says of herself, whoever listens to me will dwell secure and will be at ease without dread or of disaster. The woman of valor laughs at the days to come because she's well prepared. Women of folly persuades the young man lacking the sense to commit adultery with her and brings about his destruction. But the woman of valor brings flourishing to those around her. And the woman of valor points to wisdom in and of itself. Woman of valor is not a doormat. She doesn't just say, yes, sir. But a woman of valor takes care and brings flourishing not only to herself and her household, but also to those who are vulnerable, poor, and needy.
Vanessa,
Mm-hmm.
can I interrupt you?
Of course.
How would you interpret the concept there of fear of the Lord? What is that? How does that fit with valor in the construct?
Yeah.
Unpack that a bit.
So fear of the Lord. It is the beginning, the first step towards wisdom, according to the scripture. Now, what is fear of the Lord? Are we supposed to be afraid of God? But Jesus says, Abba, Father. So part of it, I think, has to do with Old Testament, New Testament. However, fear of the Lord being the first step is honoring, recognizing, in awe, is how I think of it. And when I start there, I recognize I don't have all the answers. I don't know everything.
Were the Jews of that period, when it was written, did they believe in a Trinity?
No,
They did not.
there was no Trinity. They were a monotheistic culture.
No, I'm sorry, eternity.
Oh, eternity. Depends on which sect you were talking to.
Okay, some of them did.
Some of them did,
Okay.
some of them didn't.
Okay.
And even in Jesus' time, there were the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And I remember it, the Pharisees believe in eternal life, and the Sadducees are sad because they don't.
Okay, perfect, thank you. That solves everything.
Yep. Sad, you see? There you go. There you go. All right. Okay. So, I'm going to wrap up here because I have to go sing. Ultimately, as Shabana argues, this is a poem from the book of Proverbs, and it actually points to Christ. It points to Jesus, who is Logos, Word, and wisdom of God. The woman of valor is a metaphor for women, for wisdom, sorry. We have been granted a living flesh and blood example of what it is to fear God, love wisdom, and walked on this earth and modeled all of these things for us. So the invitation is for all of us, women, men, whether you're a single old cat lady with no children, or married. We are all invited to find all the riches that wisdom has to offer when we seek, understand, and focus on Christ. And there is our reward. With that, I'm gonna go to choir.
Thank you.
Thank you.